Hello, my name is Severin Garrett, and I'm a certified health coach. I am so proud to be partnered with the Juice Plus company for almost 10 years now. The Tower Garden is one of the Juice Plus products that fits into the mission of inspiring healthy living around the world. Tonight, I'll be your host for this Zoom call, which is titled All Things Tower Garden. We want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy day to learn more about the Tower Garden. We promise that we'll be respectful of your time. We should complete this call in 30 minutes, and we will open up the floor for a few questions at the end. We have several people who couldn't join us tonight, so we're actually recording this, and we're asking that you mute yourselves so that we don't have any background noise. The format of the call is simple. I'll be introducing my husband, James, to you, and I'll be reading his bio first. We will then be moving into an interview format where I'll ask some of the common questions that we get from people who are considering a tower garden in the future. We'll also have some great visuals for you to see and follow along as you'll learn more about this incredible growing technology. So let's get started. Not sure what I'm getting. Here we go. First of all, James was born in London, England. You'll notice that pretty quickly. For various reasons, he chose to leave school and enter the working world at age 16. Very quickly, he realized that in the 70s in Britain, the chances of any great success were dearly limited. James chose to move to the US knowing and understanding the opportunities would be so much greater for someone willing to work hard. James is a true believer in the American dream, and he feels he is a testimony to its existence. In 1982, at age 20, James moved to New York City to start a new life. James became involved with a very high-end painting and decorating company in Manhattan for 3 years. He was actually running it himself in the end. After the recession of the early 90s, James realized the time had come for him to move on and relocate to Atlanta, where he started his own high-level decorative finishing company. At age 40, he had a spiritual awakening, and as a result, joined the church that he would, a year later, take a mission trip to China and meet his wife, Severin, that's me. The Tower Garden Farm was just another step on the journey of life of being free to own and operate his own business. It also filled a longtime dream for James and Severin to be able to live and work in the North Carolina mountains. James still believes strongly in the American dream and has a heart for those who come here with little, but are willing to work hard and make a life out of it. So let's get started. James, tell us a little bit about the farm that you have here in North Carolina. I'm sorry, I didn't put that on your question sheet, but because it wasn't in your bio, I think people are really interested.
All right, well, let's get started with a question I haven't prepared for. But luckily, I do own a Tower Garden Farm, and therefore it's easy for me to talk about. And you'll notice in that picture, there's a bottle of champagne. We don't usually drink during the day, but this was our opening ceremony, and we popped a bottle of champagne. But this is a 100-tower farm. It's in a 2,100 square foot greenhouse. I built that greenhouse by myself, by hand. We started last March. We are literally just on the cusp of being open for 1 year. The greenhouse was finished in March last year. We were already growing seedlings. We had towers. And then literally by the beginning of April, we were growing food. Actually, you'll all know what happened in April after that, which was COVID-19. So it took on a bit of a different life to itself. But this is where we are now. And that picture was taken really probably in mid-April.
Thanks, James. I think people are just curious. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the homeowner unit tonight, not a farm, but I did want you to know that that's what James does full-time today, is grow food for our local community. So let's see, James, tell us, how did you get started growing on a tower garden?
Well, you know, it's been about 12 years, and some of you Juice Plus guys will be able to tell me exactly when it was the Tower Garden came out, but we got one pretty much the moment they came out. And as Severin said, you know, I'm from England. I was actually born in London. I moved to New York City. I had no horticultural background, but because we were a part of the Juice Plus business, we were like, well, we have to have a tower garden. So we got a tower garden, and before I knew it, I was growing just incredible amounts of food. I mean, we were growing tomatoes and cucumbers and zucchini and all sorts of lettuces and Swiss chard and kale. And it just was, to me, it was incredible. Somebody who had never actually successfully grown anything in his life. And so that really is the beginning to this story, was that first tower. And we very quickly got a second one, and we got lights. We were growing indoors in the wintertime. And as they say, the rest is history.
Now tell us about this photo before we move any further.
Yeah, I love this picture. Our tower looked like that probably for a period of 8 to 10 weeks. And the reason I tell you that is because as much as we were eating off of this tower, we had some lemon balm, some parsley, some bok choy, several lettuces, and I see Swiss chard and some kale. And we would go out every day, we'd pluck food off of it, and it was enough to sustain us eating the food that we needed, but it never seemed to get any smaller. It just kept growing. And so the tower never really changed. It just consistently looked like this. And I think that's a testimony to what the tower is and how well it can work in a family environment.
Great. So James, tell us a little bit more about why people are so interested in growing their own food these days.
Well, I believe, from my perspective, a large part of this comes from the growing wellness movement. So this is just a natural byproduct of that. People are interested in having control of their own food. They're seeing what's happening to our food. They're starting to get educated about the quality and the level of the greens that we have access to. And I would tell you, it doesn't really matter if you're going to the local supermarket or you're going to Whole Foods. So all of these foods are coming from distant places. They've been growing on large commercial farms. And I don't want to get into the organic world, but even organic produce, the nutritional level in it is not what it would have been, 30, 40 or 50 years ago. And some of you will remember, I think even just last year, the recalls on romaine lettuce specifically, and that's not been the only one. So this is now, if I cast my mind back, I think it's been several years that we've had these, recalls on lettuce. And, that just shouldn't happen to our food, but this is becoming the norm. So again, I think this is just a part of the growing movement for people to, take their life back and take back control of the food that they're trying to grow. The last thing I'll say is the carbon footprint. And I think this is a much bigger picture and story, but every time someone grows their own food, they're not buying it from a store. That's one less amount of food that needs to be trucked across a country and, gassed and done through all the stuff that it needs to go through. So imagine, if 10% of America grew its own food, that would reduce the need for so much logistics. I mean, it's amazing to think about it. And I just believe that this is the movement and where people are going. And so it's just like I said, it's a natural byproduct of that movement.
So I guess I'm hearing you say it's the wave of the future.
I truly believe it is. This is the future of farming.
Okay, honey, I went to this slide a little bit early.
Yes,
but
that's okay.
Everyone wants to know, what is a tower garden?
Yeah, well, as it says there, this is a vertical aeroponic growing system. And we'll get into what is aeroponics, but this was created by Tim Blank. He was the chief horticulturist down at the Epcot Center. Now, many of you have probably been to Florida and been to Epcot and the land exhibit. You got to see all that really cool plastic tubing, and they were growing food hanging off the ceilings and stuff like this. And Tim Blank had this vision. He was doing all of this work for NASA, and he was doing the stuff for Disney, and they had all this research. And he just had the vision of, how do we create something and make this available to the rest of the world? And that is kind of where the Tower Garden started. But if we click, I think, to the next slide, we're going to talk about exactly what is aeroponics. So this is a great visual. It shows a breakdown of the tower. So you've got the base, which has the water, and that's the nutrient-dense solution of water. Your pump pumps the water up to the top of the tower, and then it just rains back down through the tower, watering the roots as it goes. But imagine when when the pump's not running, and the reality is it's about 80% of the time the pump isn't running. And so that root system is just hanging in air. Now, everybody understands hydroponics. This has been around for decades, even millennia, really. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were technically hydroponics. But with hydroponics, the root system hangs in water. So they're submerged constantly in water. Now, that doesn't mean to say it doesn't work. It's a very good and very productive growing system. However, root systems need much more oxygen than they need water. So imagine you got a pot sitting on your deck, and that pot has a little hole in it, and you got a plant. Well, if that hole gets bunged up and then it rains and the pot fills up with water, what happens to your plant? We've all experienced it. The plant dies. Technically, it drowns. It doesn't have enough oxygen. So this is the basics of aeroponics, and it's one of the reasons that the tower garden is such a progressive and well-growing system.
It's interesting. Most of us had never heard the term aeroponic growing before, but that visual does a great job of helping us understand what that means. So thank you. Let's move on to the University of Mississippi study. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, this is a great study. And I will tell you, this is a white paper study. It's been published in a journal. So if you're a sort of a nerd and you really want to drill down into this study after the fact, get with the person that invited you to the call, because we have this available. It can be sent to you by email. But what they did, and I will say the University of Mississippi is one of the top horticulturist schools in the country. And they got fascinated with the tower garden. So they took a tower and they decided to grow an equal amount of kale, spinach, and basil, or basil. And they grew that amount in the tower and then an equal amount in dirt. And so you can see the findings right here. They said that it used 98% less water, 90% less space. It was a 30% more yield. And actually, the study showed a 30 to 60% more yield. It just depends on the plants. But also they found that it grew 3 times faster. So again, this was a great study. It was a great validation for what the tower garden is and what it can do. But if you really, really want to drill down, as I said, you can get a copy of this study if you need to.
I am totally a nerd, so I love this study. So if you're at all curious, we can get you the link, as James mentioned. And it's what we use in the school systems. When they put these towers in the school systems, they use that study for the kids to compare growing in the ground and growing in a tower garden. So James, let's transition a little bit to what can we grow in a tower garden? What kind of plants?
Yeah, it's almost easier to tell you what you can't grow. So I always tell people, if it's a root vegetable or if it's a tree, you're not going to grow it in the tower garden. So you're not going to grow potatoes, you're not going to grow onions and carrots, although there's people who have tried and had limited success, but it's not designed for that. And you're not going to grow avocados or lemons or something like that. Anything in between, you can grow in the tower garden. So we've got the obvious ones, which is leafy greens, all the fruiting vegetables like tomatoes and zucchini, eggplant. But people grow melons. People have even grown watermelons off of a tower. There are some of you out there who grow strawberries. And as Annette Wagner has just told us, she's now growing beans, something called bush beans. And so there really is no limit to what you can grow in the tower. The only thing is, managing it and how you do that. Big viney plants obviously are harder and you just have to manage those. But bottom line, yeah, if it grows above ground and it's not a tree, you can grow it in the tower.
That's good information. I think people sometimes believe that they have to grow an entire tower with one vegetable, so like all spinach. Tell us a little bit more about
Yeah, absolutely not. So you can even see by this picture right here, this is a multitude of different plants going on. As a farmer, typically I grow specific towers for specific things. But obviously at home, you've only got one tower. So yeah, our tower at home, we could probably have 8 to different varieties of plants growing at the same time. And what we tell people is grow it like a Christmas tree. The big things at the bottom, middle stuff, and then the taller and smaller stuff at the top.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the day-to-day maintenance. I think sometimes people think, oh my goodness, I don't have enough time to grow, in a tower garden, because I know how hard it is to grow in soil. So let's talk about the time and the attention that a tower garden needs from a homeowner.
So what I tell people is a tower garden needs a champion. So typically, if you're going to have a family and you've got a tower garden, you need to pick one person who's going to be responsible. Think of it like having a dog. Someone's got to walk the dog and pick up after the dog. It's the same with the tower garden. If one person is responsible for it, then they're always going to be that one person to notice what's happening. So for us, I think on a general day, probably 5 minutes I would spend with the tower garden. I would go out in the morning, as was on a deck outside in our townhome in Atlanta, and I'd just go check on it. And the reason you're doing that is maybe there's some yellowing of the leaves. Maybe it's an indication that you need to adjust the pH, or maybe your nutrients aren't quite as much as they should be. Maybe they're limp, the plants are limp, and you realize, oops, we're a little low on water and the pump's only working at half speed. The other thing is, if it's outdoors, there are bugs, and this is not immune. And so this is your opportunity to see them there and then you can act quickly. But for the point of like, how much does it take to maintain a tower garden? It's very simple. The only thing that is the hard work is when you strip it down and you want to clean it at the end of the season. And typically we would do that twice a year. And it's not that hard. I see Lynn nodding her head, so clearly she doesn't like doing that part, but it's not that big of a deal. People put them in the dishwasher, you scrub it down, you give it a good cleaning, you put it back together, you start growing food again. It's very simple.
I think someone taught us years ago that you go out and you hug your tower, H-U-G, once a day.
Yeah.
And that was what James was referring to. And he actually sings to the plants in the greenhouse sometimes. So, whatever's working, we suggest all the above, right?
Absolutely. I don't think my singing helps that much though.
Okay, let's talk about the two different options of tower gardens available to someone considering a tower garden.
Okay, so we're going to go through this quickly because you can get with the person and they can send you all these details. But the tower that you're looking at in this picture, this is what's known as the home tower or the home system. This is the brand new tower. It's really only been out for a couple of years. This was designed primarily to come indoors and grow with lights. It's got a smaller footprint than the other tower. I think it's only 24 inches wide. You'll see all that stuff at the bottom. This is designed as a plug and play. So everything that you get in a box with the tower garden is designed for you to set it up, to get your seeds growing. You've got the minerals, you've got the pH, everything is there. You'll also notice on this tower, on the very top, you've got the smaller pods. So the home version comes with two sections of what we call the baby green parts of the tower. So this is for growing herbs and growing baby greens, and it just gives you additional options of what you can do indoors. But again, it's designed to be indoors. It's not that you can't wheel this outside and grow food on it outside. The idea is think about it smaller, and it's more manageable indoors. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the original tower. This is what they call the Flex now. The reason they call it the Flex is that although it was designed originally to be outdoors, you can just as easily bring them indoors and use the same system of lights on this tower. Again, you see all that paraphernalia on the top of the tower. It's the same as the other one. You get all the same bits and pieces as you do with the other tower. You'll notice that the actual tower part is no different. The only exception with this tower is you don't get the baby greens as a part of it. But you can add an extension to this one. You can add the lights to this one. You can add wheels if you want. I don't think I mentioned, but the home version has wheels built into it so that it can roll around, but you can do just the same. This one is also plug and play, but you can kind of add and subtract and kind of design your own tower with this guy. But both very simple and both grow just as easily and just as effective.
So it sounds like we really have two good options, one that's designed to be indoors, the home unit, and one that's designed to be outdoors, the flex unit. However, both can be flexible and move in or out depending on what your preference is and what your weather is. So tell us a little bit about the resources that are available to a new Tower Garden customer.
Well, probably the best one's the website. It says it right there, Tower Garden website. And I actually combined those first two YouTube videos. They're all on there. The Tower Garden's been around for 10, 11, 12 years, whatever it is. Over that time, they have captured all sorts of information from Tower Garden owners. And as smart as the Tower Garden Corporation is, some of the best information you're going to get is from other Tower Garden owners and Tower Garden farmers. So the amount of videos out there, let's say you wanted to learn, how do I harvest my tomatoes? How do I want to harvest my lettuce? How do I, manage these plants? What kind of bug is this? Basically, everything you're ever going to want to know is out there, either on YouTube, either on the Facebook page for the Tower Garden user, which is another great tool. But don't forget the fact that whoever you buy your Tower Garden from more than likely has a Tower Garden. They have experience with it, and therefore they're going to be able to answer most of the basic questions. But one of the things that I love about this community, and I always call it a community, and for those of you who are Juice Plus reps, you understand that whoever can't answer a question, there's always somebody else above them or close to them can answer it for them. So you're never going to get at a point where you're stuck and there's just no one who's going to be able to help you. You can just keep going up until you find somebody. And I will tell you, I get phone calls from people who we sold a tower to 8, 9 years ago, and I've even forgotten who they were. And out of the blue, they called because all of a sudden they've got a question. So there's great customer care behind this product.
Thank you. I think the resources are incredible too. I love the videos. How do I assemble my tower? How do I grow tomatoes? How do I self-pollinate? Just some wonderful things. So let's finish up with this slide about what are the primary benefits of a tower garden.
Well, the first one is that anybody can do it. I'm testimony to this because I never grew anything in my life, and now I'm a Tower Garden farmer, and I have 100 towers, and it's very successful with growing food. I'm not going to say it's perfect. You're dealing with something living, but the reality is anybody can do this. We've already discussed the maintenance. It's very low maintenance, so it's easy to run. One of the most important things, I think, is the nutritional content of the plants. And we don't want to emphasize this enough. It's just so important, the food that we get. So I like to tell people it's right from the vine every time. You're getting it at peak nutrition. Just a little fact is that 90% of the nutrition in plants happens in the last week of ripening. So think of the plants, and most of what you're likely to buy in the store, it's been picked 3-4 weeks ago, and it's just been ripening slowly but surely on the truck on its way to the grocery store. So you're losing so much of the nutrition in that plant. So just remember, it's right from the vine every time. Secondly, you can grow a tower garden anywhere. I mean, you could stick this guy in a closet and grow food, literally. So you can have it in your garage, you can have it in your kitchen, you can have it in the bedroom, on a bonus room, you have it by your pool, or out there on the deck. It doesn't really matter. Some people even have them in a greenhouse. There's just really nowhere that you cannot put a tower garden and grow food. It's also extremely economical. I will tell you that the average tower, this is based on all the research they've done over the years, pays itself off in the first 9 to 18 months. And I will tell you that, I'm an artist, but I'm also a nerd on the finance side. So I ran a spreadsheet on our tower garden the first year we had it. And I figured out that we pulled about $700 or so off of our tower in the first 9 months. What that meant was it paid for itself in the first 9 months. Now that was like 10 years ago. So the rest is gravy. So all of those and above, it's just an incredible opportunity to do something and have something that's so economical.
Thank you, James. It sounds like, There are so many great benefits to a tower garden. I know you have some closing thoughts before we go to the questions.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, before we get questions, the tower garden, it's basically just a bunch of molded plastic parts. But when assembled, this creates a growing platform that is unique. It's with a technology that, although really simple, it's hugely effective, and I would say outperforms any other modern technology growing system that's out there. It can be operated by just about anyone. It takes zero horticultural knowledge. Again, I'm testimony to that. It takes very little time to manage, but can literally provide a family with a selection of healthy, clean, densely nutritious food right in the comfort of your own home.
Wow, good job. You're good, honey.
Well, we try.
We're going to open up the floor for some questions. I think we have time for one or two. And let me take that off of screen share. Okay, perfect. So feel free to unmute yourself and let us know if you have a question. Maybe you can raise your hand and we'll call on you in case there's a couple at the same time.
I just like to add that I sing to my plants too, and I love that.
Thank you, Joanna.
Maybe you could come to the greenhouse. I'll bet you got a better voice than I do.
Well, we're here at that. These are my little helpers, but we love our tower garden, and I loved being here and hearing your story.
I got the
Thank
sniffles and the
you.
sneezes and the blow up.
Okay, Annette, I think you had a question for us.
So I've had my tower garden for just about a year now, and I love it. We have so much fun with it. But I do have a question. You mentioned earlier that it is a living thing, obviously, and you briefly mentioned some reference to bugs. So how do you deal with that? Because I have mine indoors right now, but I do take it outdoors. And last year the beetles ate my kale in overnight. It was crazy.
Yeah, and there are certain like insecticidal soaps that you can use. Now, when something like a beetle gets on it, they arrive, they show up, they eat, they leave.
Yeah.
We're more concerned about things like aphids, like little caterpillars that hide themselves in your tower, and before you know it, they've done havoc. And there's ways to look for things that when you get aphids, stuff drops. When you get caterpillars, stuff drops. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, if a beetle shows up on your tower garden in the middle of the night and eats your kale plant, there's not a lot you can really do.
Right.
Except it's possible to put a net around it. I mean, people do stuff like that. They typically will go to one thing or another. Okay. But again, yes, this is a living entity. There are bugs out there. It does happen. I have them in the greenhouse. I mean, I'm not immune in the greenhouse. Right. We get aphids occasionally. I learned to look for them. I use an organic insecticidal soap, so it's perfectly harmless. You spray them down and it basically gets rid of it. So, but again, on that question of resources, there's a world of information out there on the site. Annette, you obviously can just call me because you're down the road, but right. There's plenty of information out there, way more than I could probably answer the questions to.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and we do just order that insecticidal soap off of Amazon. Just look for an organic version. It's designed for all vegetables, so if you're curious.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions tonight?
Brenda?
I just had a quick one. We've inherited or been donated a tower garden, and I'm excited to get it up and put together. But we were going to do it over the winter, and things just were kind of hectic. But I don't really have a good place for it, and I was going to keep it in the garage, but the garage isn't heated, and I didn't know how cold it could go without hurting the plant.
Great question, Brenda. Your tower garden can pretty much handle anything down to about 32 degrees, 33 degrees. Yeah. If it's in a garage, your garage is never going to freeze. So you're never going to get that outside air frost on your plants. It's just going to get cold. Okay. The one thing that we suggest, if that's your place to keep it through the winter, is you can put an aquarium heater, like an outdoor pond heater, in the water and actually heat that water. So if you're heating the water to 65, 70 degrees, those plants are absorbing 65, 70 degree water into the leaves. That actually will ward off temperatures down to 28 degrees.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good question, Brenda. Yeah, we have several people that have grown them in garages all year round. Yeah, and with the lights, you're good.
Yeah, but you can also, if you're growing outside, you can throw a sheet over it, just like you do a shrub or a plant in the spring, and then you get that late spring frost. Yeah, you throw a sheet over the tower, it'll protect it. I mean, I've been known to wrap it in plastic and stick a light bulb in there, on nights when it's really cold. If it gets down to 16 degrees, yeah, all bets are off. It's gone. You start again. But that, you can usually plan for that.
Okay, guys. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. It is 8:30 or a little after, so we'll close up here. But just know that we're available. If you have any questions, we'd love to help you. And I'm hoping that you got some new information tonight on Tower Gardens. And it is the perfect time to begin thinking about growing food on a tower garden. So very, very soon, we will have tons of people starting their towers, and that would be late March, early April. And we did want to make an announcement tonight that we are moving into the seedling business. So if you need seedlings, within the next 2 weeks, we'll be selling those online, and we just ship those to you and you pop them straight into the tower. So if you'd like to learn more about that, just reach out to us later. But James, thank you for taking the time. Hopefully you guys learned some good information.
And if you guys ever want to come visit, just make a phone call and come see the greenhouse.
We'd love to have you.
Thank
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. We'll
Very
see you
good.
soon.